So many reasons. Clinical trials have benefited my daughter during her leukemia treatment. When there were no other options, clinical trials provided us with an option. Also, clinical trials are a way to give back. Some of the clinical trials that we participated in during the course of her treatment were designed to make things better for other patients, either through a digital storytelling project where they would make patients feel less alone, or a study on fatigue so they could determine if there was greater fatigue with leukemia patients or not versus a standard teenager. And just, I guess I see it as a twofold, benefit for us and benefit for others. The clinical trial that was first presented to us was in her first couple weeks of treatment. And my daughter had an extreme reaction to one of her medications. She went anaphylactic after receiving it for only a few minutes. And her nurse came in and said, "You're lucky. We have an alternative medication to this that's on trial right now, and we can, you're eligible for the trial, so let's sign you up and get you started." I mean, you never know, but just, we just asked the team and got as much assurance as we could get. Clinical trials with children, in my opinion, are very safe. Nobody wants to harm a child. Nobody wants to do anything but the best for children. I think that also with adults, but I think even more so with children. I think there's extra scrutiny when a trial involves a child, given the fact that there haven't been done for so long and there hasn't been a number of them because of that exact fact. I think, that they're just so necessary, and that, we really need them to help our children. People often would say the saying, we need to protect our children from clinical trials. But actually what we need to do is we need clinical trials to save our children. When you're in the cancer community, you see too many children die. And because there just aren't the options out there. So often I've seen kids come to the end of their options, and then there's nothing but, unfortunately, death. And I really, want more clinical trials so no parents have to face that. My daughter just didn't really decide to be in her first clinical trial. The clinical trial just became part of her protocol. When you're in a situation of, okay, you're allergic to a major medication for your cancer treatment protocol, and we have an option for you, you don't say, "Oh, I think we'll just go without." So in that case, there really wasn't an option presented. It was more like, let's sign the paperwork up and get going. She's 18 now, so clearly it is her decision. She's the one signing the consent forms, but, I don't make any decisions for her. Will I guide her? Yes, but it truly is her body, her decisions. She does her own medications. She's having doctor's appointments on her own now, where they're going off to college. It's just clear that we've been preparing her for this, but she now has to take full responsibility for, her medical situation. The questions I ask during trials is, especially with the first one, how long has this been tested? What are the findings of its effectiveness? With other trials, it was, again, is this going to work with the fertility preservation? How far along are they in the testing? What is the, probability of this working? A lot of questions like that. What's involved? How much, how is this going to affect my child? is there going to be additional pain? Is there going to be additional, issues because of this? Just all the, how can I keep the effects of this to a minimum? When your child is in a clinical trial, it's her trial. And I think they should have the information that they want to have and that they need to have to be comfortable to participate in it. One of the things we really focused on during my daughter's journey was making sure that we didn't make it our cancer and that it was really her cancer. And, us taking ownership of it. And, I think doing that along the way has been important to us to always have her as informed as she wants to be. I can tell you that changed dramatically from first diagnosis to relapse, where with first diagnosis, when a nurse or doctor would come in the room and ask her a question, she literally put her hands over her ears and say, "I don't want to talk about this, go talk to my parents." And when she relapsed, we kind of expected the same behavior, even though it was 3 years later. And I remember it was our first meeting with a fertility preservation trial. I turned to her and I said, "Do you want us to leave the room to have these discussions?" And she turns back to us and she said, "It's my ovary, isn't it?" And we said yes. And she goes, "Well, then I want to be here and I want to know." We formed some incredible relationships and just that have helped us through thick and thin. And, they've been my relationships too, that if I have issues, I will have lunch with her and just say, "What do you think?" She was involved in one clinical trial that required her to do a regular journal. And I have to say, it wasn't always fun. You have a fatigued child and, trying to get her to do it. But she understood the purpose, so she would eventually do it. But there was some prodding on my part. Strategy that, I used for her to stay on protocol, take the medications. With the medications they took, it was all done at the hospital when it was part of a clinical trial. It was more as part of her treatment I used pill boxes. And, weekly I would fill pill boxes up with her medicine, and then she would know what she was supposed to take when. And that was a great strategy of, keeping on top of everything and making sure that she's taking everything she needs. In the beginning with my child, blood draws were extremely difficult. She was a very healthy child, never had a blood draw. Getting into a situation where she was having to have multiple blood draws daily, particularly when she was in the beginning of her treatment. They worked very hard to make her comfortable, but I have to say, she screamed at the nurses. She told them they sucked. It was not pretty. I finally had to sit down with her and just say, "You have a blood cancer, and unfortunately, as part of a blood cancer, you're going to have multiple blood draws, and somehow we're going to have to get over this, or this is going to be a really hard process." And it came to the end that the staff was very good at using the special tricks, the numbing creams, the distractions, and everything they could to make things better for her. And towards, now it's like the easiest thing in the world. She'll tell someone where they can take her blood, what works for her. Actually, it was cute. One of her nurses was taking her blood and she started to cry. And she said, "I remember when you first came in and how awful it was, and look at you now." And was so proud of her for how far she had come. To distract my daughter during blood draws, there were many things we tried. Numbing cream worked, icing, just distracting with an iPad or playing games or just anything that can get their mind off of what is going on, not looking at it, not, anticipating it. I would say definitely keeping the blood draw room light and, not like, oh, what's going to happen? Oh no, this is going to hurt, versus telling a joke or, even when a blood draw didn't work, we'd kid about it. And we go, oh yeah, tell the nurse that you're terrible, you're out of here, but we, they're all good friends. And so, you just try to keep things light and distract them. My daughter was sedated. It's always a scary thing, because you just don't know how they're going to take the sedation. There's always the anticipation going in and the waiting in the waiting room, why they're under sedation, why they're having the procedure. I would usually take work with me just so I could do something to distract myself and not be sitting there thinking about, what's going on with my child. And, I have to say, after the fact was really difficult. She had a very hard time coming out of sedation, where one time we were sitting in the waiting room, they didn't call us back, and we're like, what's going on? And finally I had them call in and they said, well, we're kind of having a hard time getting her out of here. She keeps crying and saying that she doesn't want to leave. She doesn't want to go back to her room. And they go, we've never had this before. And it was funny because I asked her about it later and I said, what was going on? She goes, she had no memory. First off, don't be afraid. They're not experimenting on your child. They're not torturing your child. They're trying to make things better for your child and other children.